Hello everyone, this is a quick and dirty knee-jerk analysis of the new Splatoon Raiders trailer that just came out today, out of nowhere. I'd recommend watching the trailer first. I'm going to be stopping and starting a lot. I have watched this trailer once before, but that was kind of just out of the blue. So this is going to be kind of an immediate analysis, nothing too deep, but just sort of going through and seeing, well, what's what. And yeah, I'm only going to be reacting to the Splatoon Raiders part of this. I'm not really going to be reacting to the Splatoon 3 update material that came out after this, even though that is really cool. I will leave that for people much more qualified to talk about the sort of competitive side of this game. But yeah, sort of without further ado, let's get started. So kind of immediately, spiralite is a specific type of rock, I think. And I have heard people saying that this is important in the context of deep cut being related to the three Buddhist poisons. Because, unless I'm getting this wrong, I believe that spiralite has some sort of vague importance in that term. It also is also quite funny. Someone pointed this out to me. I will make sure to credit them when I edit this. Spiralite is actually a type of rock that generally has a spiral in it, and this is a Splatoon spin-off. So that's quite funny. Anyway. I think this is interesting. We know that Deep Cut are their families are very important in the Splatlands. They are very well established in sort of the culture and the lore of the Splatlands. Their families have been around for a very, very long time. And so the idea that they have sort of some sort of ancient map in their basement is quite fitting, but it's also quite... I get the sort of idea that this is some sort of ancient thing that they've dug up and they're kind of chasing after some long-lost treasure or rumour. That's very fitting for their character. That's basically what they were doing in Return of the Mammalians. But also it's fitting given the final Splatfest in Splatoon 3. Team Past ended up winning. We don't know whether or not that's going to have an impact here, whether or not the Grand Fest is going to have an impact on this spin-off rather than on Splatoon 4, or whether it's going to have an impact on this spin-off and Splatoon 4, or how that's going to work at all. But I think that we can kind of read from this that Deep Cut have found something in their basement, they've found a rumour, they're going to go off and have an investigation of that, and sort of that's what's going to happen. Also, moving back, we got a very sort of sneak peek view of this. I don't really know what to make of this. This kind of looks almost like a chess piece. These look like statues kind of around an edge of an island. We can see the trees here and the ground here. This is interesting, these sort of little statue pieces like that. They look kind of almost a bit similar to sort of fishing hooks, maybe. In the sort of way that the salmonids have the giant pieces of food and sort of cooking equipment around their territory. I don't know whether or not this on its own is evidence that we're going to be sort of dealing with the salmonids. I think there's stuff later in the trailer to maybe sort of discount that idea. But I think this is interesting to point out as kind of... it's non-natural scenery, and then we have these sort of repeated motifs, these statues appearing around here. It'd be interesting to see whether or not we can see them later in the trailer as well. Ooh, hang on. Yes, so palm tree, coconuts, I think. It's back. They're very big, it looks like. Yeah, that's kind of all. This looks like the map in question. I don't know off the top of my head whether or not this maps directly onto the map that we already have of Inkadia and the Splatlands. I'm not sure. Maybe we can kind of get a better look of that. I think so. This is obviously the island that Deep Cut's trying to travel to. We've got Shelly and Donnie down here for some reason. I don't know whether or not any of this is translatable. This is serif script, and this has been translated. We do know how to translate this, but I'm pretty sure this is probably like lorem ipsum, whatever, key smash. I wouldn't necessarily read anything into that, but it'd be cool to translate some of that. So, yeah, there's an article. I don't know what Shelly and Donnie have to do with that. It'd be interesting to see if they have any significance. They are kind of like Boy Scout, sort of dressed up that way. So maybe they are, for some reason, involved. This is kind of like something that they've told Deep Cut about, and they've made an article or something. I don't know. That seems a bit far-fetched, but maybe. So I think we can see some trees here. Obviously, there's this sort of bit in the middle. This helicopter design is different from one we've seen before, even if the inside has some similarities to the Grisco helicopter we've seen before. Sort of very much this, the island has this idea of sort of there's a storm, and then at the eye of the storm there's something big, glowing bright. And as we can see, sort of further onwards, it's going to fire a laser into the sky. Immediately around this, we can see, I think, sort of what looks like some ruins, some ancient ruins here. And we also get a bit of a better look at what looks like some different biomes. I think we've got sort of a more sandy one over here. And if we go back a bit, we've got this one here, which looks like it's sort of a cove of rocky trees. And then we've got this one, which is all icy. It looks a lot like Alterna here. And this one's very rocky, and it almost has what looks like lava coming down the sides here. So we've got at least 3 worlds with sort of one central one here. And this, I think, is the basic look at what we're going to be getting in the game. Obviously, the helicopter just... I don't know why I paused on this for it, so I'll carry on. Yeah, they're... yeah, they, I think, are falling out of the helicopter, more or less. Splatoon spin-off, very fun, as Deep Cut are spinning out. So the game obviously kind of starts when they are going into the storm, and then the sort of everything clears up. And I think this is the kind of starting cove area that we saw on the left-hand side in the sort of initial cutscene. This very much looks like it's Deep Cut's sort of starting home base of operations. It looks like kind of a salvaging rig here. This very much looks like it's going to be an area where Deep Cut's going to hang out. It looks sort of vaguely similar to the place Captain Cuttlefish was hanging out in the start of Splatoon 3. That's sort of the first look we get at Deep Cut's new outfits. Yeah, I don't know how much of a time skip there is. I don't think any of these characters have sort of significantly changed what they look like. Obviously, they've got new hairstyles, except for Big Man, who has no hair. So he's just got he's changed colour slightly. He's gone to green. It's really cool, like sort of really cool designs. And this is the first look that we get at the player character, who I think Nintendo's published some information about them. They're described as sort of being an ace mechanic, and I think it's possibly a bit later in the trailer also implied that this is the pilot who we saw very briefly at the beginning. And so this is the first look that we get at their gear, their equipment. This looks kind of like a gas stove, and on either side here they've got what looks like attachments. These 3 sort of hose ends on the propeller here kind of seem to map to Big Man, Shiver, and Fry, respectively. I think that's kind of cool. We've got the shark mask down here. That looks like it's Shiver's or related to Shiver as well. And we've got this pot here that seems like it would go on top of the gas stove here. I have no idea what that's about. Really no idea at all. I think this being a gas stove is a very interesting thing. Historically, like the Splatoon ink tanks have always been modelled after sort of things you hold liquid in. So before it was in Splatoon 1 and 2, it was like based on a sports water bottle, and Splatoon 3, it's kind of based on a camel pack, that kind of thing that you would hold water in if you were sort of going hiking or in a like desert environment. This sort of gas stove, maybe this is supposed to be like gas, like a little gas canister that is connected to this. But I think it's interesting as well because in Splatoon, when Inklings have their special charge, they're boiling and they're hot. So this could be this idea that this maybe allows the character to do more stuff with their ink, or I don't know. It's just notable to me that this is like based on a gas stove. That's all I really wanted to point out. This is a new hairstyle, sort of goes without saying. The eyebrows, I think, are the same as they used to be, and the eyes are, I think you can have this colour. Cool thing to add, these are freckles. I think that's really cool. From a different angle, we can actually see here, this is a shrunk down version of this, which I think is interesting. That is the same nozzle as this, and this is the same water bottle, and yeah, that's that. I think this is interesting, the fact that this character has got what looks like a kind of just about scraped together splatter shot. I think that's really cool. It'd be interesting to see what's going on here. Maybe this is going to be kind of like a swap mechanic where you can hold one weapon in like your backpack here and you can swap to it at will. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, we'll kind of see how things progress from here. We're kind of seeing the character. I'm going to call them the mechanic. We can see the sort of mechanic hanging out with Shiver and Fry here, and with Big Man as well, just shooting him. Yeah, that seems about right. That's kind of average thing for a Splatoon protagonist to do. They always have someone who they just shoot at for no apparent reason. This is the first look that we get at the kind of weird robot character. They've got kind of the same ink colour, it seems, that kind of turquoise. They've got sort of, it seems, a similar colour to some parts of this robot. This looks very much like it's... that bit there looks very much like a visor. It looks like this character, the player character, can sort of hop in and maybe we can run around there using this robot. I'm going to go a bit further back and put it on. No, never mind. We get lots of quickfire stuff here. I don't think there's anything that's massively notable. Just a couple quick close-up shots of this. We never get to see it from the front, which I think is quite telling. We also sort of get it relative to the size of the big sort of chess piece thing here. And get some more shots of the home base. Yes. I think I would imagine that this is... It seems too big to be like a companion. It doesn't seem to be like Small Fry where they kind of just follow you around here. It seems to be taking up way too much of the screen, even though we're not kind of seeing it as you would see it. This is way too big to be anything other than like a vehicle or a companion. I'd imagine this is going to be a vehicle that you're able to hop into and then you're able to traverse around and complete puzzles. These side bits look like they are weapons, so I'd imagine this plays fairly similarly to the crab tank. But maybe there's some more innovation there. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. This looks like immediately after you start, Deep Cut are in their normal outfits. This is the pilot. I am 99% sure that this is the mechanic. And this seems like sort of the end to that opening cutscene where they see that big laser in the sky. I'd imagine there's a time skip after this where you have the opening cutscene, you get to this point, then you have a bit where this character wakes up and you get to choose what they look like, and then after that you sort of go back to the you sort of go back to the starting camp area, and this is your base of operations. And I imagine that Deep Cut are able to sort of move it around and that kind of thing. This is also quite interesting. This looks like it's the second of the two biomes that we saw earlier, if I can get back to that. This looks like it's this part here. So you're starting off here and you're kind of going around in this clockwise fashion. I wouldn't be surprised if you're going in a spiral motion, as it sort of points out, as the islands are called, the Spiralite Islands. So I think it makes a fair bit of sense if you're kind of going around in a spiral. So yeah. And this is the title. I think this is really cool. This sort of design, I think it's got a little bit of kind of Donkey Kong about it almost. But I think it's really cool, kind of the rust, and then this looks like paint and it's kind of peeling away and it's oxidizing, and I think that's really cool. Also, my favorite color, so double win for me. I think there's one last part. Big I don't know what's going on here. I think this is some sort of enemy. I genuinely have no idea whether or not we're going to be fighting the salmonids in this one. The sort of situation with in the Splatoon world between the Inkfish, sort of the surface society, and then the salmonids is very it's kind of tenuous. The salmonids were invading the Inklings a whole lot more, and then the Inkfish were kind of the big runs were. And Salmon Run in general in Splatoon 3 is kind of pushing further into salmonid territory. I would be interested to see whether or not Splatoon Raiders is kind of bringing that conflict to the fore, or whether or not this is a whole new kind of character. I think this is interesting. This eye seems to kind of be protruding from the face, but it almost looks like if you kind of follow the contour here, that this is one of the eyes of an Inkfish, of an Inkling specifically. So maybe there's some kind of evil doppelganger thing going on there. I think that's a bit of a reach, but it would be interesting. This big eye could also be from like a giant squid. We could get more sort of animalistic squid in Splatoon. That would be interesting. I think obviously the sea and the islands have sort of that kind of ancient mystery to them. So I think we're going to have sort of Deep Cut and the mechanic venturing through the islands and sort of doing that kind of thing. I think it's also interesting. This is not a returning character. This is very much a new character that we're playing as. We've never seen anyone like this. They look very different. They got sort of freckles and that kind of thing. I was talking about someone with this immediately before doing this reaction. They are dressed basically 1-to-1, the same as Shell from Portal, because they've got the sort of orange jumpsuit and then the white top. So I think that's kind of funny. But anyway, get back to this thing. And then the eyes back again.
What's cracking, Squid Squad?
Obviously, we have the return of this announcer, which is kind of fun.
We're excited to share our latest find.
I think just to completely derail everything, this is a coral reef type thing. I think that's interesting. Because it kind of dispels the idea that Splatoon has huge problems with ocean acidification. I think this existence, I think, is the first time we've seen a reef of any kind in Splatoon. that isn't, the reef as in the stage from Splatoon 2. This is interesting. It dispels the idea that Inklings die in water because of ocean acidification, or that there's something wrong with the sea. This seems like very much a return to how reefs and that kind of thing worked in the time of the humans. So I think that's interesting. Maybe this signifies that this is really hidden away, or that kind of thing. But this being over a reef kind of shows that the oceans aren't too banged up. They're okay, and that the water must be within a certain bound of okayness, I guess.
Dings. What you just witnessed.
I think this is. This is the player character. They're obviously using this helmet to hide what they look like. So I think, that very much makes sense. These sort of bound letters, I think, are probably part of Deep Cut's kind of stuff that they've brought along. I'd imagine the sort of backstory behind this is that they've found some ancient things belonging to their family that they found in the basement, and then they have just decided to take it and charter this flight to go off to these islands.
Signs of the first ever Splatoon spin-off game coming ashore. Splatoon Raiders. Playing as
This is all repeat sort of information. This again is kind of the sort of fish hook type things that I saw earlier that were sort of present earlier. You've got these two sort of chess piece type things here. I don't know if there's any significance here. This is kind of fun. It's called the Spiralite Islands. Spirally pine cone type things. These aren't coconuts. We can see it better now. And the trees are spiraling. I think this is really fun. It seems like spirals are just going to be a huge motif in this game overall.
a mechanic, you'll go on an adventure in the mysterious Spiralite Islands alongside Deep Cut.
I'm just going to go back a little bit here to try and get a better look. This is a logo I don't think we've ever seen before. I don't know what this is. I don't know whether or not this is something that we're sort of going to be chasing after. This doesn't look like it's a chest or an interactable at all. This kind of looks like it's just a piece of junk. There are sort of lots of pieces of flotsam and jetsam and all of this random rubbish everywhere. I don't think that's relevant. I think this is kind of just to signify that this is a place that is connected to the rest of the Splatoon world, because there's junk that ends up here, but it's not important, maybe, or maybe it could be. I don't know. This logo here might end up being relevant later. It kind of looks a bit like a crab, actually, which I think is interesting.
Cut. Splatoon Raiders is launching exclusively on the Nintendo Switch 2 system, but research is still underway.
It'll be interesting to see when this comes out. Maybe within this year, within 2024, or it could be an early 2025 thing. I'm not really sure. It's interesting that we're getting this with absolutely no news of a Splatoon 4. I know sort of later on we're getting kind of news about Splatoon 3 getting its life extended. It's kind of having its Sheldon's Picks and Kenta collection moment. Splatoon Raiders, I'd imagine, has been in development for at least a little bit of time. But I honestly, I couldn't say whether or not it's been in development for like 3 years and it's going to come out next year, or that kind of thing. We did have information that Side Order was made by sort of a newer team of people, and it might be that they were doing that because the established team was already working on this spin-off. I think it's really interesting. I think we're basically at the end now, so I'm just going to talk or ramble for a little bit about my hopes with this. We don't know how much this is going to cost. We don't know whether or not it's going to be like a full-priced £75, $80, $90 type deal, whether or not it's going to be huge. It's going to be, all of that kind of thing. So far, we've only seen like 3 biomes. Let me try and get back to where it was. big laser. When's the laser going to come up? Yeah, there you are. So we've only seen these three. We've only seen these three islands. Presumably, there's something in the middle here. Unless each one of these is like its own fairly sizable area, I can't imagine that we're going to see like a huge amount of content in these areas. These look like fairly normal overworld areas. Obviously, we don't know whether or not it's going to be the classic Splatoon thing of, oh, there's an overworld, and then you go into a kettle, and then there's a whole underground area for some reason. Like, we don't know whether or not it's going to be like that, or whether or not we're going to be doing a bit more of like a Breath of the Wild type thing where we're hanging about on the surface of these and solving puzzles and that kind of thing. I would guess at this point that it's going to be something where we've got like the platform that Deep Cut's hanging out on is going to be our home base, and then we're going to have to move it or power it up, or there's going to be something impeding our path, and the whole point of the game is going to be going round this spiral in order to get into the middle, and there's going to be some thing we have to collect in order to get us there. That would be my guess, but I'm not too sure. It's going to be interesting to see also how Splatoon Raiders connects into the Splatoon franchise as a whole, whether or not it's going to be like a big story thing, whether or not this story is going to be able to move the entire franchise along, and whether or not Splatoon Raiders is kind of going to sort of become required reading, as it were, for the story of Splatoon 4. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I would assume that we know this is set after the events of the Grand Fest and that kind of thing. I can't imagine any of this happening sort of concurrently with anything going on in Splatoon 3, which is interesting. So, I think that is everything I had to say, but let me just go through. I don't think there's anything here that's sort of noteworthy. This fishing hook here. This is, I think, a bit the same as the... Let me try and find it. As the sort of fishing hooks were in the background, I think it like that kind of thing. You know what I was talking about. So that's interesting. But I don't think aside from that, there's sort of anything to comment on. So that's been my knee-jerk reaction and an analysis to all of this. I hope it's sort of been an enjoyable video, and yeah, I guess I'll see you next time.